Hey guys, and welcome back to another video from Tin4 Hat Advised. Now today we are going to go through the coronavirus situation. If you are a global viewer and you're not from the UK, I apologise if some of this seems poignantly pointed at the UK, but that's where I'm based. That's where my understanding of the world is sitting, and obviously where most of the media research that I'll do on Google will be driven to reports from UK-based stuff. Now I have tried to spread the blanket a little bit more with this and dig into some country specific stuff, but it will be predominantly based on stuff from the UK. So apologies if that doesn't fit your conspiracy needs. If it doesn't, please drop me a comment if you would like me to specifically look into something from another country, and I will look into it for you. Secondly, I'd like to apologise if there is some terrible editing in this. I am still new to editing video footage. I am trying my best. So if there is weird cuts where stuff looks different and you can visibly see the cuts, I apologise. I am going to have to do this video in stages. There's a lot of information for me to go through, a lot of facts I want to get across for you guys, and that will mean me cutting and editing to make sure I get the right stuff across. So the first bit I want to go through with the COVID-19 thing is the whole thing that, is this a real virus? Is it a fake? Now, I've got to say, I'm not going to dig into this for very long. There is nothing that suggests this is a fake virus. Now, I know people have been saying, oh, but hospitals look quiet and all this. Well, of course they look quiet. You're not allowed to visit patients. Even if you're taken in for another reason, you are not allowed to go into the hospital to visit. People are not allowed to go into hospitals to visit you. So is this a real virus? Yes, it is real. There will be another separate video to this one going into, was it man-made or was it actually released from someone eating a bat? Now, there is lots of stuff to go into with that, so I'm going to do a whole separate video on the origin of COVID-19. This is going to be around some of the other stuff, looking into the background behind what's going on behind the scenes with COVID-19, stuff that we're missing, stuff that's just been pushed through, stuff that just doesn't really make sense and add up, and it's a problem I've had with it from the start. It's just not all of it is adding up. So first up is long-term gains here. Now, we're talking about global change. People have been begging governments globally for real change recently in carbon emissions, in working greener, in living greener, and improved society. Now, that is a massive step change, and people were saying it needs to be quicker, it needs to be quicker. No government could enforce, or no democratic government could enforce those kind of changes in the kind of time frames that they needed to. So, what have we seen since everyone's stepped away? Everyone's gone from working from home. Loads and loads of businesses have sent their entire workforces to work from home. So when this is over, why would a business that's been paying hundreds of £1,000s a year for office space, and we're talking banks, we're talking law firms, we're talking millions and millions of businesses have office space, they now have got a question, do they even need? So you take away office space because it's a smart business move if you don't need it to not pay for business space. You take away business space and offices, you take away costs from the companies, which is great for the companies. It boosts the economy, it can spend more money elsewhere, wonderful. However, what it also does is take away the daily commute, which is the cause of most of London, especially in every major city. It's the cause of most of their pollution. People sitting in traffic, commuting to work. That's going to massively reduce carbon emissions. It's going to massively reduce pollution. It's going to just improve all of that stuff, just like that. Now, not only does it improve that kind of bit without the government having to do anything in terms of legislation, it also has the massive added benefit of removing all of the problems with public services regarding transport. Everyone complains right now, we need more trains on, we need more services more frequently, we need more buses, we need more of this, more. The services aren't good enough, the standard isn't good enough, they're not clean enough, they're always delayed, they're never on time, blah, 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 blah. If you take away the daily commute, or at least a massive percentage of it, because everyone's working from home, you also take away the problem of upgrading transport. It becomes like a non-entity. So the millions and billions, frankly, that would need to be invested to upgrade the entire rail network vanishes. The pressure of time on it vanishes. You can do it over decades now because commuting just isn't a thing anymore. And to be honest, you could probably look at progressively, there isn't going to be a need for it. You're going to have major routes, but that's probably going to be it because everyone's going to be at home. So in the UK specifically, the biggest issue a lot of people are having is why aren't we in a full enforced military style lockdown? Now, other countries have chosen to go down this route, such as China, Italy, Spain, India, lots of other countries through the Eastern Europe, Middle East have gone down into that military style of lockdown, as have some other European countries. Now, the main reason that the UK, I feel, hasn't gone into a military style lockdown is because it doesn't really look physically possible to do it. Now, there are going to be a lot of people who disagree with me on this, but there is one case in point evidence from recent history. The Tottenham riots that then went across London, we're talking maybe 4,000 people that got involved in these riots, and the police just couldn't stop them. They had no way to control it, or even they barely contained it. So you've got to look at the sheer logistics of shutting down a country, let alone London. I mean, even if you just tried to lock down London, it would take nearly all of the policing force in the country to actually secure it because of one simple fact. We don't fear the authorities in this country. We have put through so much legislation to make this country great to live in nice, peaceful times, with a very liberal agenda, which is fine for lots of things. But for this situation, it is terrible. We have grown into a culture in this country of, yeah, what are you going to do about it, copper? People are arguing with police on the street right now. There's videos everywhere of it happening. There was a woman yesterday, my housemate was just telling me, there was a woman yesterday in Richmond, just around the corner from me, arguing with police on the riverside who had warned her she couldn't sit and be by the riverside. She had an hour to exercise and for her day, and that was it. She needed to go home. 2 hours later, they came back and she tried to tell them she was mentally exercising. And obviously they arrested her and she kept arguing the point. But that's still not a deterrent for people. That's my point. She wasn't afraid of the police. She wasn't afraid of being arrested. We don't have a fear in our culture of the police or any authority. So if you did a military style lockdown, I can already see people in many areas across London, the badder areas, I'm not going to name names because people know. If you live in England or in London, you'll know. In every city there's bad areas where people just don't fear authority even more. Like on a day-to-day, they just don't have any fear of authority. So if they step out of their house because they want to go and exercise, and they get asked by a policeman or even a member of the army, what you doing? They're going to go, it's none of your business, fuck off. So, and even if they threaten them, well, we'll arrest you. All right, do what you want to do. What are you going to do about it? We're not afraid they're going to shoot us. We're not afraid they're going to beat us. We're not afraid they're going to do anything. Worst case scenario, you get thrown in prison. Oh, well, you were locked in anyway. It's not a deterrent. So the best thing Boris has done with this, and the smartest thing and it's not just Boris, I said this from the start, it's all of his regime have got their heads together and gone, how can we inflict a lockdown without inflicting a lockdown? Fear. British public are begging for a lockdown. They are begging for stricter measures. They are begging for people to stay at home. They are policing this themselves. They are shouting at each other. They are berating each other. They are making sure each other stay 2 meters back, stay in their houses. And yeah, sure, there's still some idiots going out to parks and having picnics. But if you add up the actual number of people doing that, it's a couple of hundred across all of London. We're talking millions of people. I mean, this is a huge success story from the government's perspective. They have inflicted a lockdown without actually implementing a lockdown. It's genius. Now, the other benefits involved in not enforcing a full military style lockdown is they haven't had to involve the military. They haven't tied up police or military forces in dealing with a lockdown, and that has freed them up to be proper emergency services for the country, for military transporting stuff for the NHS and moving things around. They are doing, the medics are helping out in hospitals. They have freed up so much time to actually deal with the crisis in that sense, and allowed the police to carry on policing and dealing with regular crime and regular incidents, and actually kind of just mildly enforces lockdown, like we said, like just crawling around and telling people you shouldn't be out anymore, come on now, this is getting silly. And also dealing with the idiots that are going around coughing on people, sneezing on people. There was an incident in my hometown. Someone went into their local co-op and started coughing on people, shouting, "I've got COVID-19, coughing on people." Then went into the chemist and started coughing on people, shouting it as well. Now, luckily, the pharmacist detained that person until the police arrived. But there are idiots out there, and the police need to be free to deal with that, not walking around some quiet, sleepy neighborhood telling people to get back in their houses because of a forced military lockdown. So again, another smart move from the government. So this is a conspiracy video, and you'll have got to this point and be thinking, where's the conspiracy here? Well, I said in the introduction videos to this channel, we would always be looking at both sides of the story. Now, there are bits the government have done well. There are bits the government haven't done well. There are bits for every individual that are going to be seen as good and bad. What we're going to get into now is possibly some of the stuff you may have missed that the government is getting away with as potential benefits from this situation. Now, for all of this, I am digging a little bit deep here. Some of it's going to be a bit of a stretch, but that's what conspiracies are there for, right? So to recap where we're at so far, the government, without doing anything other than dealing with this coronavirus, as it would seem to the public, has potentially saved themselves billions of pounds in upgrading the public transport system, has made will have the potential to make a massive step change forward in living and working greener. Now, those are two of the biggest problems in modern society that have been on their books since day one when they took over government. Solve this problem, solve this problem. If they can come out a year from now and go, well, daily commuting isn't a thing anymore, so pollution is just gone. We have improved London's air quality by X amount, and we've had all this extra money to invest in from our public transport systems that we've taken, and we've invested it in the NHS to deal with coronavirus. Which brings me on to my next point, the NHS. Sadly, this is where this conspiracy theory gets a little bit dark from now on. We've gone through the basics of what a government could achieve out of this, and there's probably lots more benefits that I haven't even seen. But now we're going to get into some really dark thoughts. Now, I am a person on the NHS list. For those in other countries who aren't aware, the National Health Service in the UK sent out letters to around 1 million people telling them they needed to stay at home, in their home, locked in, away from all contact for 3 months in order to protect themselves because they were considered extremely vulnerable to the COVID-19 virus. So, I say the next bit knowing full well it's aimed at me. Now, no one can deny one of the biggest strains on the NHS is people who are labelled in this current crisis as at risk. We drain millions, if not billions, out of the NHS in appointments, in procedures, in care, in all sorts of ways. So, what does the government have to benefit from allowing a virus like this to kind of roll on a little bit and go with the herd immunity route? It's going to take a lot of the weight off the NHS's system if even 10,000 at-risk patients are no longer taking money from the NHS after this. Now, that's the same for every country's global health service. If those at-risk people are no longer next year removing money and time from their national health services, or whatever they're called in each country, that frees up so many avenues for the government with regards to boasting, because it will reduce wait times, it will reduce the amount of money being ploughed into those health services, and it will enable faster treatment for people, more drugs to be available. It will mean more money can be invested. And the one thing that has led me down this route is the government choosing to zero the NHS's debt. Now, people will look at that as a wonderful gesture. Oh yeah, zero the debt so they can deal with coronavirus. Hold on a minute. What's zeroing the complete NHS debt got anything to do with dealing with the coronavirus? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. And you could say, oh, it's so they can afford to buy respirators and stuff. Okay, you don't need to clear and zero a billion, billions of pounds of debt. Now, the other question people might be asking is, who did they owe debt to? Well, they were overspent on their budget. They obviously, every avenue of government has a budget. The NHS was massively overspent on its budget. So the government zeroed the debt. Okay, but why do you need to zero a debt in order to buy a few 100,000 respirators? It just doesn't add up. But what it does lead down the route of is next year, the government can proudly say they invested in the NHS. And now, with the loss of all this life, which is purely being targeted, I say purely as far as we know right now when I'm making this video, it is only taking life from people on the at-risk list. So why wouldn't you allow it to roll on? That's a dark thought, and I did say this was going to get dark. And you might think I'm a horrible human being for looking at it this way, but I'm one of the people that is being potentially, and I say potentially, this is a conspiracy theory, allowed to die in order to alleviate pressure on the NHS long term. Now, one of the other groups of people on the at-risk list is the over 65s, or I think it's over 70s technically, but let's go with the over 65s here. Pensioners. Now, this is a global problem. We have a globally aging population. Now, I'm going to deal with some facts and figures from some specific other countries, which again is going to be a bit dark. So, every government's probably not biggest, but must be in the top 5 top expenses is pensioners, both in medical costings, care, and pension funds. Now, what we're going to get into now is the pension fund side of things, because this is a growing concern for big business, and we all know big business influences governments globally. So, there's going to be some facts coming up now from the UK and from some other major European countries about their population size, pensioners, and how much it costs, and how much the projected cost is. Now, obviously, here's the thing. If you look at all these costs, and then you take away out of that equation, let's say a total of 1 million pensioners globally, every little helps in reducing costs, right? In 2019 in the UK, there was 11 million, roughly 11 million over 65s, all eligible to withdraw state pension. If every one of them withdraws the state pension they are eligible for, that's £100 billion a year. 100 billion that the taxpayer has to pay. And potentially you could say they paid into it, that's why they're eligible for state pension, but it's coming out of the current tax year's budget. So there's £100 billion being paid a year currently. In 2050, that population is due to rise to around 16 million, which is 25% of the population. That will bring the cost up to £145 billion a year. So, what better way to lower this cost when you've got a virus rampaging through your elderly population than just to hold the brakes off from dealing with it for a little bit and just let it do its work. Now again, I know it's dark, but that's what conspiracies are a lot of the time. It just doesn't sit right. The herd mentality thing is, whilst medically sound as an idea, has a lot of dark benefits for allowing this thing to carry on and just roll through a very select area of the population, which actually causes a massive amount of cost to the government every year, and not just here in the UK. So we're about to go through and see what it looks like in Italy. Now, we all know Italy was really hard hit by the virus, mostly because of its aging population, which currently sits at 17 million, 30% of their population, which is a huge amount of the population over 65. And it's projected to rise to 22 million by 2050. That is a monumental amount of a population of a country to be out of working age, and also putting a strain on their health systems, their public transport services, and their general funding. Spain is looking at a similarly bad situation with 12 million, which is 25% of their population already over 60. By 2050, that is set to rise to 18 million, which is 40% of their population. That's a huge number again to be over 60. Now, these two countries were both really hard hit, and we know why they may have allowed it to roll on. The next benefit for government has been law changes. Governments globally are pushing through laws under the COVID-19 umbrella and have used the last day of their parliament working together in order to drive through lots and lots of legislation that has not been properly checked. On the last day of the UK government being in session before the COVID-19 closed down, 13 legislative laws were passed through in one day. For that whole session of government prior to the closure, which is months, there was 24 passed through in total. Those 13 were forced through on the last day, and one of them even included a finance bill. For anyone interested in looking it up, it's Finance Bill number 2. And it included lots of legislative laws that will impact the population. And these bills went through unchecked. The finance bill changed by hundreds of pages of documentation without anyone having a look. It was all just cut out in order to make it pass like that. If you take away all these pages, we'll just chuck it through. That's not how government's meant to work. Other appalling laws that have been passed through are ones such as the disability care law in the UK, which has just had so much backlash from the people who it is going to affect, because they are seeing their mandated care being taken away. These people are with major disabilities and cannot function day to day without a care worker, and yet now are going to have to look for private care sources and pay for it themselves out of what they can afford. But how are they supposed to afford it? What they get already in disability benefit is not going to be enough to house, feed themselves and pay for a private care worker. Frankly, it's actually appalling, and it's been pushed through under the guise of COVID-19. There was also a change to the abortion law in the UK, which was retracted a couple of days later because it was just ridiculous. It basically gave people the right to have at-home abortions. Now, I mean, having an abortion is a major thing. Giving people the right to basically do it at home, that's sketchy at best. I mean, wow, what a thing to try and push through for law. But this is the level they're going to. They're forcing through stuff and then seeing if it gets picked up. If it gets picked up, they're going, oh, okay, no, fine, we'll take that one back out. Really? This is what I could find in a couple of hours of digging through for legislative changes. There is going to be so much more that is being pushed through without us even knowing. That is scary. Now, currently the next two have been pushed through as temporary laws, but they don't have an end date as far as I can find. The first one is the police being able to fine you for simply being out in public if they do not deem your reason for being out in public to be a good enough one. Now, should that law not be lifted after COVID-19 has passed through, that is monumental power to give to a police officer. Now, we've already seen police abusing this power. They have the opportunity in the UK to levy fines between £60 and £1,000 currently. We have seen police simply asking people what they're up to, and if they say no on the first request, because they're probably unaware this law has even been put through, they're immediately handing them a £1,000 fine. Now, this is just ridiculous and a massive abuse of power. But the thing that worries me even more is this could continue after COVID-19. This law has been pushed through under the guise of COVID-19. It needs to be removed, and it needs to be one that's watched at the end of COVID-19. Now, the next one we're going to go through is more of a big business benefit law change. Now, as we've said before, government and big business, they always tend to look after each other. So, up until recently, under the working time regulations, you were allowed to carry 4 weeks of your annual paid leave over into the following year if you wish to do so. However, this has now been changed by law, and it is now at the discretion of the company to allow you to do so. This is a permanent change. It has not been made as a temporary change as far as I can see. There is no end date to it. So that means it's been done under the guise that if right now you ask for 4 weeks holiday, the company could say, no, we need you to work right now because of COVID-19. We need you to keep working and not take your holiday. However, if they wish to, they can make you take your holiday now as part of this law change. Now, that's the weird thing about the statement that came out from the government about it was they've given the company the power to say whether the reason you want to take your holiday 4 days additional next year and carry it through is acceptable or not. They've said the reason to do that is so that companies can stop you from taking your holiday now for COVID-19. But surely that doesn't work. Because if they need you right now for COVID-19, they're going to want you to carry your holiday into next year. There's something that just ain't right there. It's one to think about. So moving on to big business and rich people, we have the stock market crash. Now, this massive stock market crash that happened on the 23rd of March globally saw the FTSE 100 fall to its lowest figures since Black Monday. For those of you who don't know what Black Monday is, it was considered the worst global stock market day. It caused global economic crashes, it caused massive depressions worldwide, massive recessions worldwide. It was the worst day financially the world has ever had, and it caused long-lasting effects. Now, this is the bit that doesn't make sense. The worst drop since Black Monday, which caused untold damage to economies rolling forward, untold damage to the stock market rolling forward. Yet the FTSE 100, 2 days later, rose dramatically. Having dropped 1,000 points between the 12th of March and the 23rd of March, in just 2 days, it rose by 800 points. Worst day since Black Monday? But Black Monday caused damage for decades. This only lasted 2 days. And that's not just the FTSE 100. In the States, the S&P saw a drop of 500 points. And yet again, within 2 days, had bounced back by half that. This doesn't make sense. The American S&P market said it was their worst crash since 2008 when the housing market collapsed. That was America's single worst day in history for stock market trading. As we know, it caused global recession. So both countries' leading financial systems are saying it's their worst day since their last worst day. Categorically cataclysmic days for economies. Yet 2 days later, both were fine again. Yeah, sure, not back to their full figures as they were, but dramatically improved within days. How does that happen when no one has any money to invest? I don't know about you. I don't have money to go out and buy stocks and shares right now. I'm worrying about how to feed myself next week. And that's going to be the same for most of the world population. So who's the winners here? Big business and big money. People in government and people who run multi-million-pound companies. The same people who are reaching out to governments asking for bailouts. The financial system is broken here. So the stock market has crashed. Share prices have bottomed out in billions of companies. And I mean billions of companies globally. Share prices just fell apart. And yet magically within 2 days, everyone was stabilized again. The governments didn't buy them. They've not invested in these companies to stabilize their share prices. People have gone out and bought these rock bottom price shares and trebled their money. They have invested billions of personal wealth back into these companies, and they're going to make billions more from it. Because once this is all over and normal people start trading in the stock market again, the prices of those shares, the value will go up further. So yeah, the FTSE's up by 1,000 points. To get back to it where it normally was, it still has to rise another 300-400 points. That rise in 300-400 points is just pure profit for these guys. And they may have owned the shares in the original companies. They may have owned shares in a company at £6 a go and watch it fall as they sold their shares at £6 a go. Sell, bottom out, poof, get rid of them. And then watch it go, poof, it's now 50p a share. Now I had 1 million shares at £6. These are now 50p a share. I'm going to invest the same money and buy them all back, plus a load more. And then watch the price go up even further and up, because that's all it's going to do now. It's not going to crash again like that for a while. They've made billions out of this, and it was the same with Brexit. If you watch the stock market trading, it was ridiculous. There was a one-day crash, a monumental spike the next day, and then a massive crash again as they were just cycling their money. Every announcement that came out, they were one step ahead. They sold their money, they sold their shares, watched the share prices bottom out, and bought them all again, and just kept rolling on their money, doubling it and doubling it and doubling it and doubling it. That's what they do. It's called insider trading, and it's completely illegal. But you have to be able to prove it to make it illegal. And the problem is, the people who are going to try and prove it are doing it. It's a just mind-blowing system when you get in your head into it. And of all the conspiracy theories that I've spouted today, this is the most legitimate. This has the most legs to it. It is scary when you start digging how much money has been made by people whilst people are losing their lives, and people are losing their businesses, and people are losing their incomes, and people are scared, and people are worried about every aspect of their day-to-day life and how they're going to feed themselves and house themselves next week, and what the long-term implications of this situation is for them. The people that are buying these shares are people like Richard Branson. People coming out and asking for bailouts from the NHS, from the government on one hand, whilst investing their personal wealth to treble their own personal wealth. But their businesses are reaching out to take more money from us. It is just appalling. You can do your own research into it. It is scary, it is disgusting, and these people are making millions, billions, and if not trillions of pounds out of this situation globally. There is one final light-sided impact to all of this COVID-19 stuff, and it does benefit governments and businesses. People will now start living more healthy. They will start taking this more seriously. If you lock people in a fear situation at home and tell them, here's how you can exercise, here's how you can keep yourself fit and healthy when you're at home. Now, I know loads of people who have started doing these Joe Wicks workouts with their kids, who've started looking at home workouts, who would never work out otherwise and never step foot in a gym, but they are so bored right now, they will do anything. So, people are living healthier. That's great. It's a great impact. What's the darker side of the motive behind this? Sick pay for big business is one of the biggest expenses. If you can make people globally healthier, it reduces the number of sick days people are taking, and that's great for big business. And as we've said loads of times in this video, big business and government go hand in hand. It also will reduce pressure on the NHS. If people who were completely inactive before are now just remotely active because of this situation, that is another big win for the NHS. Now, these are positives, yes, and it's a mild conspiracy theory to say that that's the motive behind it, but it is a benefit, and it's something that people are probably not looking at. Now, the very final bit I want to go through on this is the propaganda aspect. We've seen this time and time again, normally done through Hollywood. So when America and the UK were at war with the Russians, every film was about, the Cold War and stuff. Every film, the bad guy was the Russian. Then it moved to North Korea, to Iran, to the Middle East. It's bounced around, but wherever it was, Hollywood was always presenting the bad guys from that country. It's just how it works. It's propaganda. We need people in our countries, wherever we are, to see the other people that the government want us to see as bad guys. And what better way to do that than to put it in films, because everyone loves a film. So everyone is taking advantage of this government-wise from the COVID-19 situation. China is now just monstrous in the eyes of the Western world. It came from China, it came from China. It's all you've heard, the rhetoric from Donald Trump. It came from China, it came from China. It's the China virus. Just pure unbridled propaganda from his point of view. Probably even a bit too brash and on the nose, which is why some people aren't even taking it seriously. However, from the UK's perspective, they played this really well. Yes, it came from China. Yes, it came from China. Then recently the announcement came through, well, China are actually now trying to help us by providing ventilators. Isn't that nice of them? But it came from China originally. And all the comments on the Lad Bible feed I was watching were just, fuck China, fuck this fucking Chinese, da, da, da. The propaganda here is related to trade. As we all know, there's been a big trade war going on with the United States and China, which was ended with a bit of a treaty. Yet it's still been going on, just not officially. The UK's got involved with this and had to back one side or the other. Now, we gave them access to our 5G network, And there was a massive hoo-ha about that. China and America still battling over that. America kicked off. Trump directly came out and said the English were idiots for allowing China to do that, and it was going to damage our relationship with them. So the evidence is there that this propaganda war is also a big part of the COVID-19 stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with COVID-19. There's a lot of small, intricate conspiracy theories lying in there. If you'd like me to dig into more detail into any one of them in particular, please give me a hit on the comments below and I will gladly try and do some more digging. However, right now there is limited information about this sort of stuff because, as I said at the start of this video, this is a lot of the stuff that people aren't thinking about right now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, share and subscribe. Please comment below on what your thoughts are. If you want to disagree with me completely, I really don't mind. If you want to call me a dark-minded sod, I really don't mind. But what I would like, please be constructive and please give me something I can respond to. Don't just write an insult. It's just ridiculous doing that.